Okay, just a reminder that there is a document attached to this meeting which has our agenda. Please add any agenda items there and also sign in. Okay, let's get started. Zoom controls and YouTube stream done. New faces, I don't see any. SAS updates. I have mostly been away for the last couple of weeks, so I don't have a lot to update on anyone else. I will take that as a no. Standing RFCs, I believe there's just one that's not a draft, which is Aiden's pull request, which he has on the agenda. So, Aiden, feel free to take over.
Oh, thanks. So last time we spoke about this, it was suggested to simplify things quite a bit, and I hope I've done that at this stage. And I hope that means that I've addressed some of the outstanding comments on it. So let me see if RFCs. I mean, I'm not quite sure what we want to do at this stage. Do we want to go through the RFC, or do people want to I'll show the RFC. Let's share this. Cool. So what we've done since the last time is simplified things quite a bit. There's an RFC and there's kind of a implementation that goes along with it. Again, we're not committed to this implementation, but the pull request on the implementation removes the idea of collections, which was one thing that was complicating the RFC. So now the RFC says that what we're going to do with pack build pack create is either your pack build pack create, which will create for you a scaffolded project that uses the existing bash build pack stuff, or you can pass in a template URL, and that can be used to create something that might exist in the future. And we could in the future then write an RFC to propose a libcmb based Golang or Go implementation of a project scaffolding. So that's been taken out of the RFC now and will move to a future RFC. And given that, the whole thing becomes much more straightforward, that there is an example implementation of the bash project scaffolding. If I go into my repo, and if I go into the bash example, what we now have is top level prompts.toml file, which prompts for the necessary things to create a bash scaffolding. You can see that these pretty much map one-to-one to the existing pack build pack new parameters. So this is the path, this is the API, this is the build pack ID that's passed in positionally in pack build pack new, and build pack stacks, which is again passed in, and it creates a new build pack with the necessary bits templated out. and it creates either the build or the detect and the detect scripts that we currently have inside of Pack. So it's taking those scripts out of Pack as embedded things and putting them into a separate repo that we can then maintain. And I suppose that's where the RFC is at. I suspect there's one other thing that people want to see before we think about, I don't know, maybe even approving the RFC, and that is, do we want to maintain a bunch of build pack scaffolding in a single repository in multiple subfolders, or do we want to maintain them as separate repositories? And I suppose that would be the question, because that's not yet covered in the RFC.
Okay, sorry, if you don't mind, I'm gonna jump in here because I think this ties to one of the questions that I brought up.
Yep.
As to whether this sort of functionality would support a repository with multiple sort of like subdirectories, right, of
Yep.
different languages, templates. And I think you replied in a comment that it would, but the RFC, I don't still see that clearly being spelled out.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe one of the sort of like additional clarifying points we could add is there's probably been a lot of things that we might have cleared up in conversations, but I don't think I've seen those updates actually in the RFC, right? So I think what I'm sort of waiting for is for the RFC to be updated with the resolutions of the conversations to more explicitly call out, you know, for instance, this question. And then I did still see sort of what the source code would look like for something like Go. And then the other example where you have like Bash, I don't think I saw that repository anywhere on the RFC. So I know now I'm just kind of throwing a whole bunch of items at you, but maybe there's something that we could do to better communicate the intentions here, as opposed to having these conversations or having conversations and comments. I think what I'd personally like to see is the RFC having all this information as someone reading it from scratch and not having any context, because that's ultimately what's going to be presented to the rest of the voting members, right? I don't think that they should be expected to have the context. I think they should be expected to just read a single document and then be able to approve or, you know, debate from that point.
Okay. So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So the RFC should then, we want to see repositories with multiple subdirectories. So the RFC should then explicitly call that one out at the, and again, just go back, make sure the RFC is readable from start to finish with all the necessary information, that it's a standalone document. Yeah, that's makes sense.
And then just to add to that, for maybe driving again that clarity, is we have some comments that are still unresolved, right? Like literally on the GitHub resolved sort of state. So if we have taken care of those and they have been embedded in the RFC, then we could, you know, mark those conversations as resolved. And that way we know which conversations are still open versus which ones are actually addressed.
Cool. I will get to that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so other than that, the only real clarifying point is if you were to run the pack build pack create, right? I'm envisioning now with new information that by default, that would point to a single repository somewhere that is managed by us. And inside of there, it would have subdirectories, one for Bash, maybe one for Go in the future, and so forth. And those subdirectories within that would then be displayed to the user as a prompt to then be able to select from those directories as templates. Is that the correct understanding?
No.
So, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that was what we had, and I thought we'd decided that that was just too much at the moment, and to take the idea of project templates for other programming languages out of this RFC and treat them as some kind of future problem. So right now, each project template is its own repository. And I suppose the question is, how would we want to manage them in the future? Do you want n different repositories in somewhere like github.com/buildpacks, one for Bash, one for Golang, one for maybe some of the others? Or do you want a single repository and to manage these things as subdirectories? And then the question would be, or the assumption I have right now is that by default, it would choose the Bash project template, create for you a Bash build pack. Then the question would be, how do you ask it to switch between different repository types? Do we have a command line argument which asks you to choose the project type, or does it prompt by default for the different project types?
Okay. All right. So I guess my confusion, if you don't mind going to the how it works section of the RFC.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're going to clean this up, but this is kind of where my mind came from, right? Like, so it says how it works, that first sort of prompt, right? You choose between the Go Bash or Go template, right? So that's still in the RFC. And I think I had a question about, again, the subdirectories and stuff. So I could still see this prompt being, again, the way I expressed it is something acceptable to me if we want to go that direction, right? If we want to say, hey, we can just have one repository with different subdirectories for each different sort of template that we want to present the user with, then that's where you would get this sort of list of templates that you could choose from.
Yeah,
from the get-go. And then the default template URL could be our own managed, repository with a whole bunch of different templates there.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of a suggestion I have, or an idea that came to my mind based on all this, or trying to piece this together. But yeah, interested to hear other opinions.
I like having the menu for the different project templates as an option. I was thinking like you could potentially just have a URL that directly referenced, even with multiple templates in a project somehow. But this just seems friendlier. And when you're talking about a new build pack author trying to write a build pack, like reducing friction, so just having it in the menu seems like the easiest way to do that. And I definitely think we need to have multiple templates in one repository, because I'm pretty confident on Paketo we're going to need that.
Cool. Yeah, apologies. I thought I'd cleaned up this section of the document, but I may not have pushed the commit.
I'm curious how many templates we think we're realistically going to support in the project. And then would we want some sort of auto way to select things that are out of the project? I feel like it's cuspy, because we have things like suggest builders and suggest stacks that point to things that are outside the project. So you could imagine, like, we're not literally implementing suggest templates, but it's similar in that we could pre-populate this list with things that we could include things that aren't maintained by us. Is that something that people are imagining?
Personally, that sounds pretty scary.
Yeah.
It could add some complexity.
So the command takes in an optional repository, and you can just use that. I think the default was to just go with the project provided templates. The key difference is that the project doesn't provide build packs, but it does provide templates. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So if Pacato, for instance, right, had their own sort of template repository, right, in their docs, it would be as simple as saying just run build pack create dash dash template URL and then their repository, and they get the exact same functionality. But now we don't have to. They don't have to maintain the list of other templates in our repository, right? I think it makes it more friendly for them.
Yeah.
We could potentially include like pack config options to change the default repository. So like if you're in the Pacato project and you're using this command often enough, you can be like, this is the default you should use, rather than prompting me for whatever, prompting me for the build packs project one, use the Pacato one as the default. But that's just a config option on pack side.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
That all makes sense to me.
Yeah. Sorry, whoever that was.
Sorry, I was just going to say that only you'd asked about how many templates do we really think we'll have here. I kind of think that goes along with the number of like language bindings, libraries that we support. Like right now, the docs are Bash, so that makes sense. And we have libcnb, so a Go libcnb template makes sense. But I'm not sure I could see much beyond that, because there's nothing else, in terms of languages that the project specifically supports right now.
I kind of agree with that. I was sort of asking it as a leading question because I feel like this is going to be the list for a long time. Like maybe we would accept another language binding someday, but I would need convincing to feel like that's a good idea, just given like, I think we should do fewer things well rather than like everything, but kind of maintain it. So I need like I need demonstration that we could, get investment from whoever wants to use the bindings in other languages, that it would be actively maintained.
That does seem like a separate question, or unless you're trying to get that answered as part of this RFC of like how we would accept different templates to the CNB managed one.
Yeah, I'm just sort of, I'm not trying to see anything change here. It's just asking some of these leading questions to see if it changed anyone's mind about questions like one repo or many in a repo. It's like, I think how many there are likely to be in any given case, whether it's our case or, the case of a project maintaining several templates, could change like the balance of trade-offs in the UX. But I'm personally happy to go either direction, just poking around.
Yeah, I think the only added complexity, right, is if we support the multiple templates in a single repository, would be the logic on determining whether it's a single template in a single repository, or if it's multiple templates in a single repository. Like, what do you consider? I don't know, maybe Aiden, you've thought about this, right? But like, what would you consider a template? Is it all the directories inside of a repository, or is it you go in there and you would like traverse the directory, top level directories, and you check to see if they have a prompts toml? I think that's what I would like to see also as part of this RFC, if we want to support the multiple templates in a repository, like the logic behind it, because we're gonna want to document that for others that might want to leverage this feature, like the Pacato team, or maybe even Heroku.
Yeah, that was so. Yeah, the current implementation does precisely what you said. It looks at the repository. If it finds a top level prompts.toml, it treats it as a template. If it finds if it's pointed at a URL, and if it finds only subfolders, if any of those has a prompts.toml in it, it treats it as effectively a collection of templates. So each subfolder is its own template. But I can as you said, all this needs to be self-contained. So I'll go back over this and I will make sure that that stuff is documented out.
I had a question on earlier mentioning, you had mentioned that the libcnb template, I guess, has been removed from this initial proposal. Did I understand that correct? Okay.
Yes.
I'm not 100% sure I like that, because I feel like the bash template is trivial, and I feel like it would be nice to have a more complete, or at least more complex template to make sure that we're driving all the functionality that we need.
I think we removed it from this RFC simply because this RFC doesn't prescribe what the actual templates contain. Like, this RFC is just about providing a tool that can scaffold repositories based on a template, and the actual template for the libcnb one should probably be owned by the BAT team, for example. Like, this is a platform team RFC right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I definitely advocated to remove it was the sort of bike shedding in the opinions on the template itself, or something like libcnb or Go in general, right?
Okay.
I think there's a lot more that can be discussed, but I don't know that it's very effective if we're discussing two very different concepts in a single RFC. Although I agree, right? Like, we need to make sure that the implementation that we're talking about now will support a maybe more complex template. So we can maybe do them in parallel, right? We can maybe even start talking about the Go template as a separate RFC, and maybe that'll influence the RFC we're talking about now. But I would probably still keep them separate.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm fine, from reducing the scope and reducing the bike shedding for sure. Like, that makes sense. It kind of makes me wonder then, do we really need an RFC per template, or is that too much overhead? And could we just treat the actual templates more as an implementation detail and discuss it on a PR, that would contribute that to the templates repo? I don't know how people feel about that.
I mean,
because I think even if we move it to a separate RFC, I feel like we're just going to be moving the bike shedding there. But if we have a PR and discuss it there, maybe we're a little closer to the implementation, and some of that bike shedding could be handled easier that way.
I guess there's a part of me that's similar to what we've called out with system build packs. Thinks that if we're introducing new things to maintain, an RFC is a decent checkpoint, and like a whole new template feels like a bigger decision, but maybe some of the details of what goes into it don't. If it's another RFC, we're saying this is a platform RFC, could the other RFC be a BAT team RFC? And then sort of it's not project level, and the kind of people who would be approving it and looking at it are the same group that would maintain the PR anyways.
Yeah, that would make having it a BAT team RFC would make sense to me. I think we would probably want to keep the RFC limited to should we do this and not how do we do this, to avoid that bike shedding just transferring over there, because it's kind of that could give people the chance to vote and say, like, hey, do we need a template for this library or this particular functionality, as opposed to just like what actually goes into every line of the file.
Like, you're just going to end up putting the entire template in the RFC if we get into every line of the
right.
file. It's like, should we add it? And then maybe like, if there's any like high level things we need to call out, like, we're always going to do the latest API, like these sorts of things will be options. These kinds of things won't, just like style principles that if
Yeah.
there's anything like that we need to agree on, then that would be a good place to do that, but not like every single option.
Okay, I'm on board with that.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to go away and make that RFC much more self-contained, spell things out, and yeah, make sure the implementation matches the RFC so that we can argue about that as well. So thank you very much. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know what the next item is. It the profile build packs RFC, is it? Or profile build pack
Just
PR?
PPRs, yeah. I think one thing that came up was like, where do we want to host our build packs? Like the actual repository registry. My suggestion was GHCR. Anyone have any thoughts, objections?
I haven't
Docker Hub, because that's where we put our other images, right?
It's just tokens to maintain.
I haven't used GHCR for much. Has anyone used it? Like, what has your experience been? Has it been reliable? Do they have any weird API limits or like get like Docker Hub or anything like that?
It's fully OCI compliant. I'm not aware of any API limits because all of Homebrew relies on GHCR.
Okay.
And experience is generally better than Docker Hub for things that I've put in there. I know other projects that I am involved with use it. So like Kavona, for example, use it to host their images, and that gets like, that's gotten so far 100 million downloads out of GHCR. No limits, nothing to be paid. And it's easier to manage tokens. There is no way that you could leak tokens or prevents one, like it also allows you to discover the packages right with the repository. One less thing to worry about.
What's the concern around leaking tokens on Docker Hub?
Not leaking tokens, but just managing them. With GitHub, GHCR, you don't need to manage it. You just need to say that, hey, give the workflow right permissions, and that's it. It generates a token for you when it merges to main.
I feel
What
like if
about-
that was a reason to pick GHCR over Docker Hub, is kind of the decision we'd want to make with all of our images rather than just on this one. I feel like there's a lot of value in predictability. It's like if this is where I know to go, this organization on Docker Hub to look for images published by the project, and then we're publishing new images and they're not there, that doesn't feel right to me. I feel like I'd rather have a story about migrating everything than making a different decision in this case.
I'm fine with that. So Docker Hub it is. Although I would
So
still like to discuss the GHCR at some point in the future.
So we have in the pipeline builder tooling, we have the capability of publishing to multiple places. So it will publish to the primary and then basically just copy the images to other registries. Because like right now in Paketo, we're primarily publishing to GCR, but we also are copying to Docker. So that could be an option as well if we feel like there's an advantage to having it in multiple places.
I don't see any advantage, at least from my perspective, having it in multiple places. It was just GHCR is easier to manage for me.
Okay. Yeah, we're only doing it in Paketo because it's legacy, but okay. Yeah, I can, if you can set up secrets, I can wire that into the pipeline.
I think you already did. I just had a question on the pull request whether we wanted to use GHCR, but if it's Docker Hub, I'll just set those things up for the repository.
Yeah, if you look at that workflow, you can probably see the name of the secret it's expecting and just match them out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I think there was one other thing I was supposed to do on that PR, and I apologize, I haven't gotten a chance to circle back to it. So
I think that was it.
okay.
Then I think the last agenda item was just libcnb v2. I see there are a couple of open PRs there. Just haven't had the time to take a look at them. But is there anything urgent that you want me to look at?
One of the PRs, let me see which one, hold on. One of the PRs, it came about from the profile build pack. I think it was 151. Yeah, 151. There's kind of this disconnect with the profile build pack that where the logger gets created. The logger gets created by libcnb, but then the build and detect functions that we generate then have to go and create their own logger that doesn't get passed down through.
Okay.
And it used to get passed down through because the build and detects were structs. So you could attach it to that struct and then retrieve it. But we switched them to functions with the V2. And so there's kind of a disconnect in how you would do that. There are some ways you can make it work. I don't know that they're particularly elegant. So I had proposed that PR as a possible way to get around it, but it does change a function signature, which I'm not happy about. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts. I think there's possibly other ways that we could do it as well, and just to see what people think is like kind of the best way to be able to kind of inject that down into the build and func or build and detect funcs.
Okay, I'll take a look. I think I was okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
I wonder if a more future proofy thing to do here instead of passing this one thing down would be to have like like build options.
That's
where you could do the the like with logger kind of thing.
Yeah.
So then if we wanted to add more in the future, we wouldn't have to change the function signature.
So that's kind of what we have now. So when you create, there's like a couple layers here. So when you do the initial step, you're creating a main method thing and you're passing in a list of options that you want to set. The main method converts those options into this config object. That's a struct. That has stuff that is mostly specific to libcnb, but that's also where the logger gets attached. And then that config object does not get passed down to the build and detect function. So those options that come in that are configurable, say from like the build pack author standpoint, there's a disconnect there. They're not getting passed down into the detect and build funcs that the build pack author supplies. So they can't really see any of that config. The only config that at the moment that I could imagine someone wanting is the logger, but like you said, for future reasons, maybe, there could be something that comes up that they would want access to. So I think the latest proposal was to pass just the logger through. Yeah, but we could potentially pass like the config object, or create some new, like, I can't think of the right word that I'm trying to think of at the moment, but some carrier object that would, pass options through. Because I am aware, like you said, if what happens when the next object needs to get passed through, we can't break the signature again. For sure, it's a concern.
I need to actually take the time and like overview this before I
Yeah,
suppose
same.
anything else, because I don't have
Yeah.
any smart, I'm just guessing about what's in there. I need to look at it more closely.
Yeah, just when you're looking at it, don't think of that PR as the best option. It's just that was the first one that came to mind. I'm totally open to other implementations if we think it's a better route.
Okay, anything else? If not, we can call it early.